What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin.
And we are back with yet another album review because this week was just nonstop. So nonstop that we actually had to put up a poll to figure out what we were doing as a bonus sixth review. And actually, this one kind of jumped out to like a clear lead right out of the gate. And I think all the selections on that list were really good. But we are going to go over the latest offering from Black Curse, Burning in Celestial Poison. This also comes out on the 25th of October, just like everything else did. This comes out on Sepulchral Voice Records. This band formed in 2015 in Denver, Colorado. This is their second album. I am a big fan of their first album, Endless Wound.
Me too.
Vicious, dark, gnarly blackened death metal, just chock full of evil and atmosphere and just disgusting riffs. And, well, we got plenty more of that on this one. And I guess to a degree, this would be considered a supergroup. This features current and former members of bands like Chemist, Spectral Voice, Primitive Man, Ulthar, and Spirit Possession. And it kind of sounds almost like all of those in a way. Maybe not so much Chemist, because this is just flat out dark and evil as shit.
Yeah, actually, when I sat down and started writing down bands like, oh, this sounds like this and this sounds like this, and then I realized that I was naming off bands that these dudes were in, so whatever. So when we get down to the, if you like this, you're going to like this, just look at the lineup of people that are in this band, and that's what this sounds like.
Baseline, I would say that what Spectral Voice does for like atmospheric death doom, this band does for blackened death metal. This is so chock full of atmosphere that it doesn't need to remind you at any point that it is evil sounding as hell, because that is the entire album. And it's a little bit different than Endless Wound. Endless Wound was more tracks, a little bit more broken up. You had some shorter songs, some a little bit more like D-beat driven. These songs are much longer. In fact, there are at least 3 tracks in here over the 10-minute mark, and they pack as much atmosphere and tremolo and reverb and just anything to make the album sound absolutely just haunting as hell. Like, this album will take a belt sander to your soul if you actually have one.
And I would even state that this record, unlike their first one, I would state that this record probably has just a little bit more atmosphere. I think they were going for something just a little bit different. I think atmosphere was a big pull for this record, because while there are still riffs and nasty tremolos, like a lot of it is just blasts and atmosphere.
Yeah, that is definitely something I would say is just magnified on here. The vibe of this album is inescapable and raw and vicious. And while that definitely describes Endless Wound too, there's something about this one where it's like these drawn out sections and like more atmospheric dropouts that it's just constantly seasoning the fact that, you know, Satan probably loves the shit out of this album.
Yeah, I have no doubts in that department. Fairly horrifying atmosphere, and I think a lot of that, once again, can be attributed to not only the billion layers of guitars and tremolos, but B, the constant anguish screams and growls and whispers coming at you in all directions, and everything sounds like it has a static hiss behind it or on top of it or whatever. Just the whole time it's just a very like shrill, just you're like, man, because it's already, again, 90,000 layers.
Yeah, it's like trying to navigate, you know, through like an entire room full of hornets, and they're all just coming after you at once. The atmosphere is just caustic. And once again, this was, you know, produced by Arthur Risk, who did an amazing job on the last one. Here, I feel like, honestly, this is some of the nastiest production he's done here recently.
Yeah.
Wall to wall, just sonic assault. And that's right from the rip of the opening track, Spleen Girt with Serpent. That sounds like a lovely dish. I wonder if there's a sauce that's drizzled over that. Never mind, I don't want to know what the sauce
Nope,
is.
I'm out.
But it kind of just sets you up lightly with just this droning tremolo, and then is off to these absolutely vicious blasts. The drum work in here is hateful, I guess. Like, this sounds like he is playing with contempt for his kit. Like, the thing was destroyed by the end of these sessions. Every snare hit is like the kind of like full stroke hit. There's not like a lot of like light blasting. There's not light anything on here. Light was not involved to this, and playing softly certainly wasn't either. Everything is dissonant, angular, and caustic, and it drones on spots with just the most disgusting of riffs. Now, while I would say kind of like the last one, it is a little bit more geared towards black metal in terms of the atmosphere and a lot of the riff work, there's still a fair amount of death metal woven in here, namely on Trodden Flesh and Flowers of Gethsemane. Both of those songs, you get the deeper, kind of like lower tremolos. The guitar tone just sounds thicker and meaner. You do get some more cavernous roars every now and then to kind of play off of the absolutely agonized screams, and possibly even more disturbing, like spoken word and satanic chattering. Yeah. There are points on here where I thought the album was trying to communicate with me. I was like, you haven't killed your family yet. You've been listening to this stuff for years. Seeing them alive and smiling really disappoints us down here. Satan to me sounds like Beetlejuice. Anyway, the constant chatter in there, and again, like panning back and forth, and then like spoken word, and like someone's trying to conjure up some Lovecraftian demon. It adds so much to the atmosphere. Honestly, it almost does as much for the atmosphere as the constant din of staticky guitars.
Yeah. And really, most of it's just droning tremolo, and it kind of goes, I guess, hand in hand with the constant barrage of blasts and rhythmic assault that's happening. There are some riffy moments, like there's a big Death Doom breakdown, kind of incantation style in Trodden Flesh, or Flowers of Gethsemane, which actually, it's still tremolos, but it's more akin to Morbid Angel tremolos. Like, they're tremolo riffs at this point. Really, I was waiting for Dave Vincent to come on and say something.
There's definitely, like, points in here where they just, like, kind of, like, drone on single chords a bit more, and occasionally you get that stomping blast, very similar to, like, Pro Fanatica. But, I mean, across the board, outside of the bands that these guys are in, there's a lot of other influences. Like, there's a lot of second-wave black metal for damn sure, and I definitely got a lot of Marduk, especially in the faster, more aggressive sections, which good luck figuring out what sections those are, because most of this is very fast and aggressive. Yeah. But also, like, a little bit of witch vomit in terms of, like, some of the more intricate riffs in here. And again, you do get some groovy patterns every now and then, and some, like, more, like, like flat out, like, thrash metal gallops. But one of the big comparisons I made is to maybe a little bit more underground black metal act out of California, Black Fucking Cancer. That band is obscenely heavy, obscenely dissonant and dark, and this band just kind of has that vibe as well. And the breaks in the madness and aggression and darkness are few and far between, if not completely non-existent. The first dropout in Spleen Girt with Serpent is not one of, like, just like, all right, we're gonna, like, kind of lay on a melody and kind of like, all right, we'll bring it back.
Right.
No, they just drop out to just feedback and atmosphere and, like, rhythmic, like, broken up tribal drums, like, just slamming the floor tom as hard as possible while the frontman just screams his guts out in a subway. This album sounds like it was recorded in, like, an abyss, and the only thing in there besides their instruments was probably some tentacled creatures trying to just tear them apart. And as far as, like, any sort of, like, melodic flair, like, yeah, there are some really good, like, catchy riffs on here, but nothing is like a pleasant melody. Like, there's not really, like, a big melodic break on here where
there's not.
You get, like, like lead melodies or something like that. Most of the lead work on here is savage. Like, they sound like they are, like, feeding their guitar through a fucking wood chipper and just turning it on and recording it.
There's leads per se. Actually, there's just a bunch of wild dive bombs, especially in the first song. There's like 15 different movements in that song. Just a pit of gnawing demons, gnashing teeth. This album is just full of grossness. And there is some groove, too. It's in pockets. The song Ruinous Path, actually, I would say it's more condensed. It's only about 7 minutes, which, granted, is still a long time, but it's not as long as 10 or 11 or 12 minutes. And it being more condensed, they focused more on riffs and groove than they did on just straightforward blast beats. For me, it was kind of a nice break because the first two songs outside of that gross-ass breakdown in Trodden Flesh were mostly just blast beats and atmosphere and tremolos and wild insanity, so it was cool to see him break it up a little bit.
Yeah, there's some good double-time grooves, some excellent evil harmonies. And again, that's like probably like the most melodic I would say it gets on here is like, yeah, you get like harmonized riffs, but they are like dissonant, they are just like darker than hell sounding, but they do generate like, well, a very particular kind of hook that black metal fans look for. But you also get some, like, thrashier riffs that come up. Same thing can be said for Flowers of Gethsemane, too. I think that song, honestly, is one of my favorites on here. The breakdown on that one in particular is just haunting and dark. Like, if it was played, like, I don't know, a half step slower, that one would have totally had the spectral voice vibe to it, albeit with like a little bit more black metal to it. But that song has, I would say, a lot more transitions into like stuff that kind of escapes just the constant blast. Like there's, again, like double time sections, there's some like thrashier gallops, some solid grooves. It breaks up the song really well, but it constantly does return to that blast section because that is kind of the gear that this band has. But it also, again, just lays on the atmosphere. And if anything, I would say like this album is great to just listen front to back for kind of an experience. Not a pleasant one, like overall, like, I mean, yeah, it would be pleasant to metalheads. To anyone else, they'd be like, oh my God, turn that off. The furniture is starting to float. And in a way, that's kind of like Primitive Man, albeit like different, where Primitive Man will drone on single chords and let it carry out, and the rhythm's plodding and slow. It still has that very caustic atmosphere. Yes. Here, it's just a constant barrage. And it kind of creates the same effect. Like, you can kind of get locked into like an evil trance on here.
In fact, from the end of Ruinous Paths to the beginning of To Babylon, I was locked in a trance. And when To Babylon started, I jumped.
Yeah.
Because that's how like, I just got lost in the end of that song. And then when To Babylon comes in, it's this big fucking drum hit, and I was just like, Jesus! And I jumped.
I saw it. I was waiting for him to ask me. He was like, dude, what day is it? Fuck, how long have I been here?
But that speaks to this record and indeed how dense and trance-inducing it is. Like, you have to really kind of be zoned in order for that to happen, because music doesn't normally scare me like that. I get scared in jump scenes in horror movies, but to have a jump scare appear in a song doesn't happen often, and that speaks to just how like mind-boggling this is. Like, I got locked in. That's how locked in I got. To be locked in, the songs do have to kind of drone on, and that's one of my gripes is a couple of these songs were pretty damn long. Like, you could have trimmed off maybe a minute and a half out of most of these songs and it would have made more sense. Like, Spleen Girt with Serpent, actually, I didn't like the first time I listened to it. We listened to it again, and I liked it more. But it is long. And the same with Trodden Flesh. Although I do like Trodden Flesh, it's also very long.
Yeah, I will say that some of these songs do feel a little bit drawn out, and they drone on sections that I would say are just, more haunting and atmospheric than they are, like, riffy and interesting. And, I like my black metal and blackened death metal more on the riffy side. Yeah. Now, granted, they do get into, like, riffy sections, but I feel like there's a lot of, like, pauses for atmosphere, and this album is swimming in it, and it's, like, probably a really gross, like, black liquid. Like, that's the atmosphere. Like, whatever they found in the basement in Amityville Horror, that first one, it's that. But because a lot of this gets drawn out, and, like, sometimes the transitions, they don't necessarily change the song very much, it can kind of start, becoming a little repetitive. There are some weird transitions, though, that do stand out. Like, the good ones that stand out, like, namely the Death Doom sections that come in, like, absolutely disgusting, and just a cool, different way to approach sounding evil as fuck. Mm-hmm. But on To Babylon, there is a very strange transition. First off, that sharp jump scare at the beginning was interesting, because even I was like, wow, that got really loud for a second. Yeah. Oh, that's the next track. Because Ruinous Paths and To Babylon, I feel, are essentially one track broken up into two pieces. But there's an odd section on To Babylon where at the middle of the song, it starts doing kind of the big finish. It feels like it's the end of the song, like you get the, the tom rolls, the crashing cymbals, and they're just wailing on the guitars. It's all scratchy and vicious sounding, and you feel like, all right, this is going to be where it peters out, but then you notice you have a lot more track to go. Mm-hmm. And it just feels like a very odd transition. And they do a good job at the end of Flowers of Gethsemane in terms of like making this long, drawn out, like atmospheric end where it constantly builds the din of noise behind the music. And they're really good at working in like the atmospheric elements, like Trodden Flesh, like how it opens up with an isolated riff. You have this atmospheric din that builds behind it, and it's got that creepy. It's a satanic chatter. Like, it's a conversation with many things that probably aren't human. But that point on To Babylon, I just felt like was just like an odd transition. And, granted, it does a lot of awesome stuff on that song. That one was kind of just I don't know, strange. Like, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me.
I don't know. There were times when I personally would have liked to have heard the guitars a little bit more during the blasty sections. It's not that I couldn't hear them. I can hear them. But the gross tremolo riffs that are being played in the background, I feel like I could have heard just a little bit more. But once again, who the hell am I? I'm just getting into this stuff. And, yeah, just for me personally, you know, I wish I could have heard them a little bit more.
I mean, it could be more to do with, like, the production. I mean, you know, like, black metal, generally you get more, like, gainy, sizzly guitars. So you get that kind of, like, static drone when they're being played super fast. I could hear them pretty, you know, clearly, but it all kind of, like, turned into this just wall of evil noise that I ended up really liking. Yeah, I dug this album. I don't know if I dig it as much as Endless Wound. That one...
I like that album.
I like that album a lot. I think the songs might be broken up a little bit better, but this is also really solid, and I'm going to go ahead and give this 4 stars. This album is vicious. Like, I would just say it's flat out evil sounding. Like, this doesn't sound just like, ooh, it's dark and spooky. No. This album sounds evil as shit and violent as shit. Like, everything is played with just ferocious aggression. Like,
contempt.
Yeah, contempt for melody, contempt for, you know, sounding remotely, you know, just pretty or catchy. Like, you know, to us, to people that listen to stuff like this, you're going to pick up on, like, some catchy riffs. But again, you play this for someone that has not been initiated with something along these lines, they're just going to look at you like you need to be in a padded room.
Yeah.
Every single second of this album is vicious and caustic, and honestly, I just dig it. Like, this just has like a dimed intensity across the board, and those brief pauses for additional atmosphere. I don't know, I think it just kind of like reinforces a lot of stuff that I really dig. Like, there was a point here where it sounded like someone was like screaming from inside of the trunk of a car while 2 other people discussed what to do with the body while he was still alive. So that was probably his last moments that he
I know where that is, actually. I wrote that down.
But yeah, if you like, again, like most of the bands of this band is like comprised of, especially like Ulthar, Primitive Man, and Spirit Possession, but also Marduk, and again, Black Fucking Cancer. Like, I got a lot of those vibes too, and even like a bit of like Witch Vomit, especially when it came down to the more death metal sections. Check this out. This is just absolutely insanely dark, and I dig it.
You know, oddly enough, I'm also at a 4. This record is dense as shit. I know we talk about this is evil and blah, blah, blah. No, this is pretty evil, and I'm willing to bet that if you played this for any of your normal friends, they might kick you out of their house. There are some really great riffs in here. Again, I'm a sucker for big, dark tremolos. Like, that's the way to my soul, especially with my journey through black metal, is nasty, down-tuned, darkened tremolos, and this record is full of it. The drums, much like Mike Smith from Suffocation, he's beating the shit out of these drums.
R.I.P. that snare.
Yeah, no shit.
Done.
In spite of the fact that these songs drone on a little bit longer than I think they need to, they're all really well done. Spleen Girt with Serpent, albeit it has 15 movements in it, it's very entertaining.
Pretty sure if you eat Spleen Girt with Serpent, you're going to have about 15 movements too. Not pleasant ones.
Plus, I don't know if it's me, I don't know if there's something wrong with me. I mean, there's probably something wrong with me. I think we can all gather that by now. I like really evil sounding music, and this is definitely that. Like, I don't know if it's because I was raised in church and this is the polar opposite from that, I'm not sure. But the constant voices all the time, and the chatter, and the din, and the variance in vocals, the growls, and the anguish screams, and the, just again, that dense-ass, dark, evil-sounding atmosphere just really hit home for me. I really enjoyed this listen. Again, probably not as much as their first record, but this is a really solid offering. Again, if you like any of the bands that Nick mentioned already, you're probably going to really like this. Check it out for yourself.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you were new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also now have memberships. They are only 99 cents, and our perk will be doing a members-only live stream, which we will probably do sometime next month, because, again, this month has just been nuts with releases.
Yeah.
We also have a booger troll. Still not used to saying that, but that's a thing we have. We will probably have more booger trolls soon, just whenever I get the time to...
He's got to have a family.
Yeah, he's got to have a family, because boogers travel together.
We're all about family here.
And boogers, apparently.
And boogers.
But yeah, this is to help us kind of get away from Patreon and also help us with the StreamYard raising their prices thing, which again, they're adding stuff and blah, 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 but it is more expensive. But if you would like to help us out there, there's a join button down below. We would appreciate it. We also still have our store, t-shirts, hats, all that stuff. It's at thrallsmetal.com, and that is linked down below too. So if you'd like to help us either way, we would appreciate it.
Album reviews, discography rankings, tons of content, multiple discussion forums, Nick's never-ending collection updates, booger trolls, shirts, hats, merch, all that jazz, all this stuff at Thralls of Metal we do all for you guys. We appreciate you, all of our subscribers, everybody that's a big part of this channel. Thank you for being a part of it. We appreciate you, and we, try to show you by doing stuff all the time. So thank you.
Yeah, you guys absolutely roll. Tons of content coming your way. And yeah, we're getting close to year-end lists and such, so stay tuned for all of that. I know, it's going to be hell making those. But yeah, looking forward to just overloading you guys with more content. So one more big thank you because of how awesome you are, and we will catch you later.